Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast with Elizabeth Chappell, where every week we dive into how you can turn your craft into a successful career. Get ready to have the career you've always dreamed of.
Hello, and welcome to episode 95 of the Craft to Career podcast. I am Elizabeth Chappell, the host of the podcast. This week, I have a very special guest on the show. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I've worked with this guest. But before then, I want to invite you to subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. I don't run ads, but I do try to bring a lot of value and a lot of great guests and just even myself sharing information on the podcast. But in order to do that, I do rely on your reviews and your subscriptions to the podcast. So if you haven't yet, please take a moment to go and leave a review for the Craft to Career podcast. So this week we have Michelle Fernandez. She is a very talented marketing expert. I hired her to help with my ads last year. And in fact, we have an entire episode that's going to be on her podcast where I dive really deep into my experience hiring someone before her, and no names or anything, but just how she knows what she's doing as a marketing expert. And recently, we are actually in the same mastermind this year. And so I've reached out to her, and I did not realize she's not just Facebook ads. Like, she does marketing with all of the things, with your funnels, how to drive more traffic to your products. I mean, she is the real deal and a major wealth of knowledge, and she's just super sweet and fun. So I cannot wait to introduce you to Michelle Fernandez. I'm so excited, Michelle, to have you here. My audience knows how much I love you because I talk about you. So I will let the introduction be done by you. Can you just share a little introduction of who you are in the marketing world?
Yes. So, hi, I am excited to be here. And you're just so lovely. It's like so nice working with people who are really like driven to make things happen and more importantly, help other people make their dreams happen, if you will. So my journey, I have a digital marketing agency and I work with mostly and mainly course creators, coaches, people who have memberships and masterminds, things like that. And I do have a couple of brick and mortar businesses like salons and things like that, Pilates studios, stuff like that. And I really am all about driving more traffic and driving more demand for your offers and really get your visible out there to the masses, like amplify what you're currently doing. And ultimately, so you can create this predictable growth in your business. So you can kind of stop that feast and famine mode. Like a lot of people are even, it's funny because even though they're generating all this revenue, they're still like every month, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay my bills? Right. And you're like, wait a minute, you just brought in $100,000 this month. What do you mean? Right. So it's about not only creating this growth, it's like predictable, profitable growth is really what I like to dial in on and figure out like where the gaps are really in your whole marketing funnel, like your business, and then figure out how we can go in there and then start to have like a quantum leap to get to there.
Okay, well, that's so appealing. I don't know a business owner out there who isn't like, yes, I want more sales. I want more traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody comes to you, do they generally, well, first of all, how do they generally find you?
Oh, my mom asked me this morning.
It's a
She's like,
common
wait,
question.
it was this because I got a new client and she's like, yeah, like we celebrated. And then she's like, well, wait, how did they find you? And I said through referrals because I really feel, especially in my line of work, that's the best type of thing. Like you don't always want to have all your eggs in any one basket. However, when you get those referrals, it's so nice because they're so warm because you've done such a great job for somebody else. So they've already vetted you, so to speak. So that's how most people find me. If not, it's from podcasts like this, or I've been on a stage or something, and then they're like, "Oh, you seem really cool. What can you help me? How can you support me?" Like that kind of thing.
That's cool. And I did find you through a referral.
Yeah.
And someone recently asked me, how do people find you? It's a very healthy practice in a business to understand where your traffic is coming
Yes.
from.
Yes. Absolutely.
S- s-
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when someone does reach out to you and they're like, "Hey, I want to hire you." What does that process look like? What do you first ask somebody?
And this is a really good question, especially if you're looking to hire any type of, I would say, independent contractor, whether it is an agency or not. So for me, what I'm looking at is really what I have found or learned, the
Mhm.
lessons that I've learned. Because when I first started, it was just like, I want all this business and I'll work with whoever. Right. Because I just need the money. Because I just left my 9 to 5. I got to pay my bills. How am I going to do this? Okay, that was not the right way to build your business.
Yeah.
So now what I'm really looking to do first and foremost is to see how passionate someone is about their business because with my personality in particular, what happens is sometimes I end up caring more about their business than they care about their own, right?
Yep.
Because I see the potential, I see their vision, I get so excited that I'm like, yes, let's drive all these people, and we're da, 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 da. And I'm like, yes, we're more, more, more. And then they're just like sitting back, like, if it happens, great. If. So I definitely
Mhm.
look in that. And I really look to see like, are they mentally prepared um, to play big, right? Whatever big looks like for them to really go to that next level. Like they're all into growing their business, right? And then it's like, okay, we know that there's going to be some level of fear. So, how
Mhm.
are we going to move through the fear to get to the other side to that next level of fear? However, what was it? I was talking to a client the other day, and then I talked her down off the ledge. And then she leaves me a Voxer message. She goes, I could tell you're a really good mom. And I'm like, where did that come from? Because she goes, you handled me so well today when I was freaking out when I went
I
to
love it.
press that button to launch her new product that she was putting out. So, because it does happen. So, I'm also looking for somebody who is going to respect the fact that I am the expert in what I do, as well as I respect them that they are the expert in what they do. So, this is like a mutual relationship, like a coming together of leadership, if you will, on what we're going to do. And together, we are going to move forward, right? Not somebody who's going to hire
Mhm.
me and then shift me in every direction because that has happened. And then I'm like, oh, they want this. And then they don't get the results at all, like
Yep.
not even what they were
Yep.
expecting. And then I'm like, that's on me because I allowed them to kind of direct me. So that was another lesson learned. So that's pretty much what I really look for. And then I ask all the rest of the questions, the normal stuff, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, so I'm excited to dive into like what things you do to help people because
Mhm,
I hired you to do ads to help
mhm,
me with ads, which was such a game changer. In fact, we're going to do a whole episode on your podcast diving
mhm,
deep into that, so y'all need to go check that out cuz it was amazing. But I did want to touch on you said sometimes people are a little bit of I hate to say head case, but they're afraid or they're like, how what signs do you have that like this person isn't ready for success
mhm.
mentally?
Yes. Um, and yes, maybe head case is not the right word. However, we all get to that point sometime. And I don't care where you are because you would be very surprised. Some of these people that maybe you're looking up to in whatever world you're living in, that what I call like the famous people, some people call them the gurus or the influencers, whatever you want to name them, is literally they're all head cases, right? Because every level you get to. So it's almost like, okay, when I look at them, it's like they're still really nervous, but they're still taking action and they're still moving ahead. And that's the thing. And then open enough to hear, okay, this is not working and not get defensive or the other way, like all, depressed or discouraged
Mhm.
that, oh my God, I set this up all wrong. Oh my God, now I gotta, no, it's like, okay, I know what it is. What do I need to do to fix it? Right? And
Yep.
then I'm like, here's what and I don't just say, oh, this is broken. See ya. Come when
Right.
you got it together. It's like, okay, this is what I would recommend. Let's start here with just this one simple thing. Let's make that one tweak and then we move forward. Okay, let's now change this. And then when it's like that, but when I see people start to freak out, and that's when I know that they're not ready. So it's the
Mhm.
action taking. It's like feeling that fear and doing it anyway, right? With the proper direction,
Absolutely.
you know.
Well, and you've got to be an action taker to have success. And with that will come mistakes. Like I bet you cannot name a single client of yours who hasn't been like, "Oh, what? Dang it."
Right.
Who's had some ups and downs,
Right.
but being able to move forward. So when Oh, go
I
ahead, you
was
wanna
just
say
gonna
something.
say, like, one of my clients is a very, I would say is an influencer. So we scheduled her webinar and she gets on the webinar and I get a text and she's like, no one's on. What is going on? Like, do I have the right day? And I'm like, oh my God. So I go in and I'm like, did I schedule it? What's going on? Well, the person in charge of sending the emails did not put the link to where everybody was supposed to show up.
Oh, no.
Right.
Mhm. It
So
happens.
she's just going with the flow. And then we take, like, literally within, not even within 5 minutes, we got the link out to everyone and people start coming on. So what could she have done? Say, oh, nobody's here. I'm going to hang up. I'm going to just disconnect. Or she just going to kind of talk this through, wait for her team to do what needs to be done and get people on. And guess what? From that, that she didn't even have anybody on. She sold $10,000 within 60 minutes. So if
Oh
she would have
my.
walked away and hung up and gotten all upset or got up, yelled at the team because they didn't have whatever in place, she would not have made $10,000. Right. So this is the other thing, being open, being coachable, and really making all your decisions based on the data and not the drama. Okay, because
Oh, so yes.
emotions, it's easy to make decisions like that, and most of us make decisions based on our emotions, right? Oh, that sucks. I'm a loser. Nobody wanted to come and hear me, right? And this was the first time she was doing this webinar.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
So you could have thought, oh, nobody wanted that. Yeah, I had some signups, but nobody really wanted it. I'm just going to scratch it all together. That's what a normal person, I think. I might have
Mhm.
even done that too, right? So then when it was all done and she was still like, okay, when she hung up, she's like, okay, tell me what happened. I said, this. We've already fixed it for next time. So it's done, right? While she was talking. Then I said, okay, let me just look at the numbers of what you did. You had this show up rate even though they got the link. You had this sales conversion, which was higher than any opening webinar you've ever had. So, can you just imagine the next one you do when everything's working smoothly, what that's going to look like? So, those are the things where it's like, you're like, womp, womp. Then, when I bring out the numbers, you're like, hey, that's not so bad. And then you're able to snap out of whatever was going on in your head. You're like, oh, okay, because you
Yep.
have that information.
Well, and it's interesting because even for me, as I'm listening, I'm like, well, people still liked it. It was the link that was broken. But let's write this story a little differently. Let's say the link hadn't been broken. Everyone did get the link and still nobody came. It doesn't mean that her product's a failure. There's still something to look at to be like, oh, the message wasn't right, or what piece of the pie wasn't right. And let's focus on fixing that. So,
Exactly. Exactly. And honestly, when I first started, I did do some webinars, and there were times where I was talking to myself because I
yeah,
thought, you know what? I'm going to just practice walking through this. And how much easier is it going to be for me to go through it performing, but nobody in the audience? Like, it actually got me more relaxed for when people did show up. And guess what? That replay link went out to people. So if my energy was low, then nobody would have bought through the emails, right?
yep.
I look at everything as an opportunity to learn. And I heard this, I can't remember his name, but he talked about turning your failures into fuel. And when he said
hmm
that, I'm like, yes, yes, that's what. So I always remind myself, how can we turn this failure that we're calling it into fuel for the next time?
Absolutely. There's always something to learn and to
Mhm.
improve. And when I hear people say things like, well, I've marketed, I've done everything I can do, and my sales aren't good, I'm like, that kind of mindset is not serving you. Like, there's
Mhm.
always something that you can look at doing a little bit better or improving on. Which brings me to your services. Like, what things do you work with clients to
Mhm.
like help them improve their sales and get more traffic?
So we talked about the Facebook ads and things like that. The other thing is your funnels. So there's two sides to this that I do. I build them out. So it's more than just the design, right? So I really come to, you're like, I want to sell this product. So I, even if you don't ask me, I still tell you what I think. And I'll be like, well, what if you tried this? So you can actually get, maybe even get a little bit more money. Like, so for example, if you were to sell some sort of a product, like, well, what could be like an upsell? So like, it's funny because I drag my husband to all these events. I did it on purpose at first, just so he would like be okay with me wanting to join something, right? And then it was
Right.
like, well, gosh, when I have these conversations with him at home, like I want him to understand because he's really, creative and the sounding board. So we went to McDonald's to get him coffee. And then they were like, well, would you like a apple pie with that or something? Whatever they asked. And he turns to me, he's like, that's an upsell. I'm like, it is an upsell. Everybody
Yep.
has them. You are right. I'm glad to see you are paying attention. But like, what
Yeah.
kind of an upsell could you provide? Right. So I really look at like, because whenever you're doing some sort of a funnel, like whether it's in person or whatever you're doing, you are looking to see like, okay, how can I make the most out of it? How can I earn the most out of it? Because most likely you are running paid traffic to it. So we're looking to see how can we get the most return on whatever investment that we're putting in, whether it be time or money, right? So that's like one side. I kind of strategize, what is this going to look like? What is that customer journey going to look like? And make sure it all goes through. And then on the other side, I do like this fractional chief marketing officer. So that just means part time for those who don't have somebody in full time. So variations of it. But basically, I look at their company holistically and I first start with what are your company revenue goals, right? And then what does the marketing department have to do to achieve those? So we always want to make sure that's aligned. So it is coming in and literally, like with a huge spreadsheet, breaking down to see all the data and then find the gap. Like, what is the first thing that is below a benchmark? That if we even change this, it's going to be like that domino effect. That if we change this, it's going to push everything else to increase. Okay, now we got this flowing, we got this system going. What's the next one that we need to improve? So that's more of a bigger project, like really growing and expanding. And that's what I really love to do. So I always push
Yeah.
myself on. I'm like, okay, this is what you need to track from here. And oh, look how cool this, goes. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
My heart rate is going high and I'm like, I need to hire you immediately because I have like, well, and so here's the deal though. A lot of my listeners are more, not all, but most of my listeners are, this is pretty advanced stuff. They're not quite there yet.
Hmm.
So even for them, I can hear them thinking like, wait, what does she mean? This domino effect. So I guess if I were to share in my business terms and tell me tell me your thoughts on this, but like over time I started with one product and then you touched on a customer journey. So
Hmm.
figuring out like what things would a person buy before they buy my main product and what would they buy after that? And so this domino effect, are you like, well, let's look at that thing that they would get before they buy your main product and how to get more traffic to that
Yes.
opt-in or whatever.
Yes. So let's say you're giving a free design pattern or something like that, right? So it'd be like, okay, well, are you getting the leads that you should be getting? So are you putting it out there? And let's say the benchmark is for every 100 people that see it, the benchmark is really like 30, 40 people are going to actually opt in to get the free thing. Okay.
Mhm.
So if your number is at 6%, then that's the one thing that we can start improving to get it to the 30%. So then you can get more leads. So if you're spending, let's say it's costing you, you're spending $100. So let's say 6 leads or 6% is costing you, I don't know, $20 a lead. Well, now if I go and get you 40%, that $20 a lead is going to drop significantly to maybe like 6, 3, I don't know, right? So then
Mhm.
now you're able to get more leads with the same ad spend. So you see how it's affecting not only with what you're getting subscribers to get new people into your ecosystem to then buy more stuff. And then it's also getting your marketing costs are able to maintain what they are. You're not having to increase the budget. So what happens is, this is what I see so many times. They're like, oh, Facebook doesn't know what they're doing and I waste all this money. And I'm like, really? Let's just look at it and how can we do this? I did
Yep.
this is an example with one customer. She was doing a boot camp, different from what I know the people listening do. So a boot camp is something like they participate in something and they learn something for a few days, and then she pitches their course. So the first day, she was getting 26% of the people opting in. I went in, I was like, let's change blah blah blah. I think we changed a couple of little things. The next day, it went to 58 point something in one
Okay,
day.
that's crazy.
So
So,
think
what
about that.
things do you look at? Things that I can think of on my radar: photos, the
Mhm.
words. I
Mhm.
don't know if we understand the power of the words.
Mhm.
Are there other things that I'm not thinking of?
Yes. So messaging is everything because you could sell everything with messaging, right? So when you're saying the words on the page is like, is it the problem that they solve? Is it something that they want? Are you creating the curiosity? There's all kinds of things. Are you showing them what the desire is going to be without the pain or struggle? So that's one thing. Also too, sometimes it's technical, right? Sometimes it's like, is there literally a button so they know what to do? They might read it, but maybe they can't see it before the scroll. So they're like, okay, so now what? So what happens? Because our attention span is like, I don't know, now it's probably like 4 seconds, something ridiculous. We just swipe, we move away, we bounce off the page. Sometimes this is really big, is the mobile optimization. So we might be putting something together on the desktop and you're like, wow, this looks beautiful. It's perfect, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at your phone, the font size is so big that maybe you see like a word and a half. And then they're
Oh,
like, whoa,
yeah.
what's going on? And they bounce, right? So it's just,
Yep.
even sometimes it's just little single tweaks that make a huge difference.
All I want to do right now is hire you full time to work for me all the time. That's all I want. What have we got to do to make this work? No, okay, but I did also want to talk about, you mentioned solving a problem.
Hmm.
So again, people in my audience get really stuck on this idea of narrowing down the niche.
Hmm.
They either don't understand it, or don't believe that it matters, or don't know what that looks like.
Hmm.
So first of all, the niche, because you've worked with clients across the board, so
Hmm.
I'd love for you to touch on the niche, and then within the niche, what does it mean? Like, why is solving a problem important, and how could that look like with a quilt pattern? You
Mhm,
know?
mhm. Okay. So let's talk about the problem really quick and then maybe we can talk in circles because sometimes I do that. Um, so when you talk about the problem, most people run faster from pain than towards pleasure, right? So when we were talking at the beginning of this conversation, we were like, how do we stay in this positive mindset? So then it's like,
Right.
I was like, got so into my mindset that I was like, I'm going to make everything positive. And then I was like, this is not good for marketing because I would think people would want that desire, right? But they don't want to sit in that fear or that pain or that struggle. They'd rather, you know, be like they're not even like running towards desire, but they don't want to feel that negativity. So it's almost like you have to hit on what that negativity is. So I'm just throwing this out there and maybe we could walk through this, but like maybe one of the let's just say you're doing quilts for your baby, right? And then you're like you don't want the pain to be that like when the kids get older, they didn't have that baby quilt or something special that then they could pass on to their child and so on and so forth, right? So it's all about maybe creating that emotion because emotion in your messaging is very, very good. And how would you describe that pain, right? And you might think, well, that's not really a pain, Michelle. But it is because you
Hmm.
can't get back that time, right? So when you dive into that a little bit more, then you're going to see that. When it comes to niching, this was a big thing and a lot of people do struggle with it. So if you're one of those people, you are totally not alone. And I in fact did because I thought in my agency, oh, I know how to do all these things. Like literally I know how to do all these things. should I be doing all these things?
Right,
It was funny
exactly.
because I'm like, I'm doing this. And one of my clients is like, hey, by the way, do you know how to do this? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, la, 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 you know? Um,
Mhm.
but if as we start talking, this could be something I end up offering as a complete service. When I read this book called Built to Sell, and it ended up being a marketing agency that was struggling because they offered all the things, building a website, doing advertising, whatever, all these things, and they were struggling to make it work. So he went to a gentleman asking for coaching, and he says, I want you to pick one thing that you either love to do or one thing that you want to sell. And he's like, there's no way I cannot da 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 because we do all these things and I have all these people that build the websites and like these departments. He's like, pick one. And I want you to be the go to place to go do this one thing. And I can't remember what they picked, but let's just say websites. So
Mhm.
he literally cut out all the other services. And not only did his revenue go up, his profitability went up. That when he went to go sell the company, it was like, what? Right? So what ends up happening is when you niche down, so for example, let's say the baby thing, you know that either they're going to have another baby or the baby's going to get older and they're going to do something else. But guess what? Now they're in your world. So now, just like I was saying when my client asked me, he's like, "Hey, do you do this?" Well, now that I have him in my world, but he came to me for one thing, right? And now that he's
Yep.
here, I can be able to look and see, hey, what do you want? Or what else do you need? Or I identify things and I say, oh, we can help you that with that here. And it would be the same thing for you. So you would either identify, well, what's the next need or problem that they would have? So what is that next milestone for that child? Right. Also, too, now you're looking at referrals. Because I know when I got pregnant, my sister in law was pregnant, my friend was pregnant, right? So now you're looking at, oh my God, that quilt is beautiful. Where'd you get? Oh, So then that's also how it starts getting out and getting word. And then once they're in your world, you go to sell them something else. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
which okay, I'm gonna give a shout out to one of my students here because this has come to my mind. She speaks Spanish, and she started a Spanish speaking podcast for quilters.
Hmm.
I cannot think of a much more narrow niche,
Yes.
right? And now she's like she'll reach out every once in a while. What about this? What about this? And she was like, I have a separate Instagram account for the Spanish speaking. I was like, yeah, you need to only do that. Like,
Hmm.
go all in. She's like, what about all my English speaking people? I'm like, they're not your customers.
Hmm.
Like, it's so scary for people to give up because they feel like, but if I appeal to more people, I'll have more customers. And I don't know how to like express to people except show examples of success like you
Yes.
just did.
Yes. And I
But
see where
yeah, I'm
she's
so
coming
excited for her.
from. And here's the thing, you have to decide for you as a business owner, how much time and energy are you willing to do? So, really, to me, that's like having two full businesses because you would
Yep.
have, if she did a course or even like the instructions would be spent. So it's like also pulling yourself in two different directions, right?
Yep.
So it's like, does she have a team that can maybe do XYZ maybe in the future? Right. I don't know if you follow Shalene Johnson.
Mm-mm.
She was actually, if you've ever heard of Beachbody, it's like the
Oh,
workout.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so she was
Yeah.
one of the fitness personalities, and that's how I got in this business.
Really?
Through her. So she had this whatever, and then she got into the business and marketing and it kind of all fluctuated. So what one of the things, and this is where I learned from her, is that she was the go-to fitness whatever, and she didn't introduce the marketing until she was already known for one thing and people
Yep.
continued to buy, and then now she introduces, so now when you're talking about increase that upsell or the purchase, now it's like, okay, well, who was in here that was in fitness that maybe has a business and wants to learn marketing? And then she was able to go off in two things. But that took her years to do,
Yes.
right?
Well, and with the niche, I mean, going back to this idea, generally a niche is solving a problem. So
Yes.
let's use the Spanish speaking quilter. I literally have people who speak Spanish and they're like, I want to learn how to do this, but there's a hole. Like
Yes.
there's a group, a population that has a problem that's not being solved, or they're looking for a product, but like, who's the go-to? Where do I go to find this?
Right.
And I cannot tell you how many people are like, I'm just learning how to quilt. What's the best beginner? If someone could really niche down and become the go-to beginning quilter, but nobody does because
Right.
they're like, but then I want to add this and this. Like, if you can be known as the go-to and
Yes.
solve that problem, you will increase your sales and
I
credibility and
mean, you
all the
could
things.
even, I mean, depending on, I wouldn't say not to niche yourself down so small that there's like only a hole that, you can even be like, even if we go back to the baby quilting, that does maybe for babies of like military spouses or something like,
Absolutely,
right? And then your
absolutely.
patterns and your designs are all blah blah blah, army, navy, whatever,
Yep.
right? Or firefighters, police.
Oh, yeah.
Like that, those types of things, because then there's a market for that. Because it's like, well, wait a
Yep.
minute, I find these baby things, but there's one and then everybody has it. So
Mhm.
there's all kinds of ways.
I'm telling you, like, the more you can niche down, the more success you'll
Yep.
have. Like, it's crazy, and it's always scary. Any student who I have a coaching call with, even when I talk about branding, like, you need to choose certain colors and only stick with that. They're like, "But I like all the colors." I'm like, "That's great. You can like all the colors,
Right.
but your business has to have a brand,
Right.
you know?"
Mhm. Because it's recognizable. Exactly.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. So for you, what have been some of the biggest, I mean, we've talked about mindset. They have to be ready to accept that success, lean into the fear of growth. But what are some other things when you meet a business owner that you would say, like, really strive to have XYZ to be successful? And I'm
Mm.
putting you on the spot here, but
I know, I'm like, "Oh, so many things." Um, I really look at it like a couple of things. Like when we were just talking about this is how quickly you can snap out of something, or one of the other things is how resourceful are you? Right?
Mm,
That is huge
yes.
because you could pretty much figure everything out. I tell my mom and one of my friends is, I'm like, I am not 1-800 support or am I not Google? I
Yes.
appreciate that you think I'm so smart, but I am not as smart as Google, okay? And those are the little things that it's like, okay, it'll take you 2 seconds to, you know what I mean, to be more resourceful or figure out like where you can find these things. I think that alone is really good. The other thing is really taking responsibility for your business, right? It's like no one's going to save you. I'm not here to save you. Your spouse or whoever, it's like it's up to you, and as if you want your company to be successful, it's like you have to step up to the plate and really do that. And that's one of the things that I noticed even sitting around a room, like we're in this mastermind together this year. It's so exciting. It's like when you sit around the room and you're looking at these women, only because there's no men in there, but
Right.
you're looking at them like, okay, what I always look and say, okay, what do I admire about each person, right? And sometimes, and not with everyone, like as I started working more on my like working through the way my thoughts, create my feelings and all that kind of stuff. And I've become more self-aware. So what happens
Hmm.
is I can catch myself, not all the time, but I can hear myself saying certain things and I'm like, oh, I need to change that. Right. And I can also hear when someone else is talking when they're fighting for their limiting beliefs. Right.
Yep.
So it's like, depending on how close I am, I'm like, "Did you notice that you said this or whatever?" Because sometimes we don't notice that we're saying it. One thing I heard, and I thought this was interesting, Brooke Castillo say, she's like,
Hmm.
"What is the one sentence, at least one, that you say on repeat?" That is causing you not to do your things, right? And when you
Mm,
hear questions like that, like little prompts that you can find journaling somewhere, that then now you become more aware of what is it that you're saying to yourself? How are you responding to those things? And becoming more self aware about that will just put you in a different position of who you need to be right now in this second to show up and be the boss that you know you need to be, right?
yep. I am so curious to hear your thoughts on this because as I'm going through this, I just had the thought. Tell me, I don't know. Okay, tell me your thoughts on this. we need to have all types, right? Like I have a friend who I was chatting with the other day and I was like, "What's your dream? What would you love to do?" And she was like, "I love to be a worker bee. I want to
Mm.
be behind the scenes. I don't want to make the decisions." And so as I'm hearing this, I'm thinking people might think that, "Oh, I can make it work." But being an entrepreneur, owning your own business doesn't have to be everyone's dream, right?
Correct.
Like so maybe those limiting beliefs, not that it's not limiting beliefs, maybe it's just self-actualization. Like
Mhm.
what is your joy? What really does light you up? Is this the thing for you? And not letting it be because you don't believe you can do it, but I guess being aware enough that this is really what you want to do, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm. And even for me, well, I call that also too when you're like, "Oh, she wants to do this." It's like recognizing your own strengths. And if you do want to be an entrepreneur and have a team, who can offset? So if you are the true visionary, I'm sure you're not all up in your project management system, like making sure deadlines are
Right.
being met. Okay. Like I get it. So it's like,
Right.
but who can you have come on and help you to make sure those deadlines are being met so you can, achieve your dreams or financial freedom or whatever it is that you're looking for. Um, so I know for me, I also got into like a niche. And then it
Mhm.
was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. It doesn't light me up. How the heck do I get out of it and move and pivot? Right. So that was
Yep.
challenging for me as much as I, in my mind, was like, oh, I'm doing this. Nobody else was going along with me. I'm like, "Hey, guys, I'm over here." And then it was like, "Oh, no, we're still calling you for this." So, that was a little challenging, but in navigating through that, but then you figure it out because what's more
Yep.
important is that you be happy and you wanna sit down at your desk every day, not crawl back under the sheets, you know? So
Right. That's also yeah, that's a really good point too, because you might be really having success or moving forward with this thing, but you realize you don't like it.
mm-mm,
And that's not a failure.
no,
Like that is learning and now you've pivoted, you've changed, and
exactly.
here you are.
And I literally said to myself, like, I kind of got down on myself, kind of a little bit. I was still like, I don't know, is this the right thing? Like the doubt of, do people not see me like this? So I was allowing other people to put the value on me rather than me put the value on myself. And then one day I was just like, I built my agency up from nothing. If I did it once, I could do it again. So I really
Yep.
looked at it like I'm building it up from nothing and I'm going to go this way. You know what I mean? But it didn't take away what knowledge and what experience and what I've already learned that I already had,
Yep.
right?
Because
So
it's valuable.
exactly. And that's what I just had to literally keep reminding myself. Like, I know this, I could do this. And it was like I had to, I think they call it like evidence stacking. I had to like either write it down, going back and look at here's evidence of what I did here. I literally have a folder of testimonials. So sometimes I would go back, look at screenshots that somebody sent me just to remind, not to like build my ego, but to remind myself of who I am because I was not even open to hearing it. Right. It was like my husband would say, oh, but this. And I'm like, oh, you only say that because you're my husband and you love me. Or, oh, but this. Oh, no, no, no.
Yep.
They only said that because and I would make all these excuses, and then I'm like, "Wait a minute, why am I doing that?" They wouldn't have said let's not talk about my husband, but this person wouldn't have told me that. They didn't have to. So it's like recognizing that in yourself and being open to receive it.
Absolutely. And that's so smart that you save it. I wish I'd done it sooner, but saving the nice DMs or
Yes.
emails, like some days I've really got to pull those out and be like, let's read that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, have you ever experienced people tearing you down publicly that you're aware of?
Oh, publicly? Not publicly, um, but I've had, one that I comes to mind of a client that did not see that they were the problem. Okay,
Yeah.
listen, I worked with my mom for 30 years, and so no matter what I did, it was like, if a customer said something, it was even though she would defend me to them, it was always something we could have done better, okay?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I interpreted that, okay, well, I was always wrong, right? Or and then, of course, as I matured, I realized, okay, maybe it is that we could have done something better. But these are the lessons that you go to learn from, where it's like you have to stand in your power and your knowledge and your authority or whatever it is. And sometimes you have to realize that they're not going to see it your way, that there could be one circumstance with two different perspectives. And unfortunately, we have to be professional in our
Yep.
response or whatever, because especially in like in my world, if it is all referrals, like I don't want the reputation to be whatever that is. And it and it was funny enough because the girl that was working for me at the time, she recognized it right away. I kind of felt something in my gut. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, this woman is at a higher level than what I'm used to dealing with. So maybe this is the personality of the person at this level. So this is okay. We can do this. I am strong enough to get through it. And then as we were going through and going through, the girl that worked for me, I could tell like she didn't want to say anything because I kind of shut her down, which also as a boss, I'm learned my lesson not to always do. Like I didn't like stop complaining, but I was just like, it's okay.
Right.
And we're going to get through this. And then I was like, I should have listened to you. I should have listened to you and listened to my gut. Um, but I would say that was it. And then we just figured it out to work, to be okay with it, because I really recognize that. Were there lessons that we learned? Yes. Was I in the, like, who's really wrong or right? Right. You just
Right.
have to be good with it. And look, I'm still here today and people still refer
Yep.
me business and people are very, very
Yep.
happy. And sometimes, I mean, you talked about people ripping you down in person. Like something happened with another client and I thought, oh my God, he's so mad at me. And then he literally called my phone number, which I never give out my phone number, but I was like, and he's like, I just wanted to tell you how awesome you are. And here I was thinking, oh, he's mad because this happened, which wasn't
Right.
even my fault. But I felt like, oh, like this whole link thing, that wasn't my fault. But then I'm like, I
Right.
felt
Yep.
like, oh, should I have followed up with her? Right. I
Right.
automatically take on that responsibility, even though it's not my role. So I almost put some of this negativity on myself. So I have to learn
Yep.
to, you know, let that go.
That has been interesting for me as a business owner. At first, whenever someone emailed with like this didn't go right, I was instantly like, they're right. I made a
Mhm.
mistake. And then I kind of overcorrected and I was like, oh no, I know I'm right. And now I'm in this in between line of like, step back, look at what happened and answer with kindness, and like see if there's something you could learn or do better here.
Right.
And if not, then be nice about it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
not that I wasn't nice about it, but yeah. So, well, this has been such a fun conversation.
Yeah.
I could chat with you for days and days, but for our listeners who want to find you, where's the best place for them to
And
find
you
you?
can find me on Instagram at the Michelle Fernandez. You could send me a DM. That would be awesome.
Awesome. And you have a podcast as
I do.
well?
It's called the Traffic and Conversion Show.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Michelle, thank you so much for being here on the podcast. It was so fun chatting with you. If you couldn't tell, just the vibe in the podcast is so relaxed and fun. And Michelle really knows, I mean, she has experience helping with marketing. And I do invite you to go over and check out her podcast where I'm a guest on an episode because, like I said, we dive deeper into my experience hiring her. But yeah, she's the real deal. Like she really knows what she's talking about. And I hope that you enjoyed hearing from her about tips for success for your business and a few little marketing strategies sprinkled in there, your customer journey and offering some upsells along the way. So, thank you so much for being here on the Craft to Career podcast. Again, if you've not left a review, please do. It really does make a difference for the longevity of the podcast. Also, I do rely on referrals. Chances are you heard about this podcast from somebody else. And if you have, I'd love for you to pay that forward. Take a screenshot, share the podcast with someone who you know would benefit from hearing about the podcast. That would mean the world to me and it would make the difference for one of your entrepreneurial friends. So, thank you so much for being here on the Craft to Career podcast. We'll see you back here next Friday. Until then, have a wonderful week.